Okay, we're back. Episode 43 of the Punching Down podcast. Last week, it was the stock market edition, which everybody loved because it seems like it's all everybody can talk about is the stock market right now, which is funny because, you turn on the news and they're like, yeah, it's only like 50% of people are even in the stock market. And then of those 50%, it's like, one of those 50% owns half the stocks. But anyways, it's captivated people. I think there was this story going on, a real narrative where it's like, this David versus Goliath thing, which, just so you know, ended up being pretty much bullshit, at least in my opinion. We'll get into it some more, but it's been a crazy week. It's funny too, because last week, if you listen to last week's episode, which a lot of people did, I started off how I moved the podcast from the earlier in the week to releasing it on Thursdays, and I recorded on Wednesday nights because I was like, crazy things just keep happening on Wednesdays, so I want to be able to talk about it on Wednesday night so that it can happen on, talk about it on Thursday. And then last Thursday, I released the podcast, Thursday morning, and then in the middle of the day when, this epic short squeeze, the mother of all short squeezes, is happening, Robinhood and many other brokers. I guess Robinhood's technically, they're not a broker, or whatever. But anyways, they wouldn't allow people to buy the meme stocks anymore. They basically said, look, we're limiting purchases of the meme stocks, which caused the stocks to absolutely fucking crater. And then everybody was like, this is bullshit. This is a conspiracy. All the hedge funds, they basically, it was either the hedge funds or the SEC, but whoever was getting fucked out of losing all this money, they just got their buddies to just, give a quick little phone call over to the Vlad over at GameStop to just say, look, you gotta stop allowing buying, to stop the short squeeze so we can get out. So this whole crazy thing happened, and of course happens on Thursday. So now you're not going to be listening to this until a week later after it happened, but I'm still going to talk about it because that's obviously the big news, and hopefully something crazy doesn't happen again tomorrow, but seems to have died down. So basically what happened last Thursday is, just like I said, in the middle of the day, just boom. And it wasn't every brokerage, but it was, or trading platform, but it was a lot of them. They basically said you can't buy. We're not allowing purchases of GameStop and AMC and Nokia. They're like, you can only sell, which is fucked up, by the way, because here's the thing, right? One, and I'll say this, I don't think it was like, a lot of explanations have come out. It wasn't the hedge funds or the SEC or whatever, the government being like, hey, here's a little doing our buddies a favor. That was the result of what happened. I can guarantee you that a lot of these people who were short GameStop when it dropped from 300 to 100 took the opportunity to get the fuck out and just cover their shorts and just move on with their lives. I don't know the exact short position. The funny thing is like, because, and what people aren't really like even talking about too much is like, people are taking new short positions in GameStop. As much as like the people got fucking ass raped on the way up on that crazy short squeeze, assuming, because there's two camps too. Because if you go on Wall Street Bets right now, there's all these people who are like, it's not over. They go and they take like because in 2008, Volkswagen very, very temporarily became the most valuable company in the world because of a crazy short squeeze. Talked about it briefly last week, but so people are like, you are here on this chart, and we're just getting started on the short squeeze. I'm telling you, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Maybe I'm wrong, but if you bought shares of GameStop for $300 or $400 a share, you're never going to be even ever again. It's not happening. It's over. But so last week, Robinhood, they limit the share buying, which, here's the thing, if you can only sell something, if you're only going to allow sales, and now it wasn't only allowed sales everywhere, but if you're going to take away a large portion of people's ability, a large portion of people who own the stock's ability to sell, or to buy, sorry, and you only allowed them to sell. And the thing is, like, the markets there's a huge psychological element. So the moment you tell people, oh, you can't buy anymore, they're like, oh, that's fucked up. I just don't want to be in this, you just threw an unforeseen variable into this equation. So they're like, I don't want to be involved in this anymore. And then they all start selling. And then people just watch their, like, money going lower and lower, and then they get panicky and they sell, and then it causes more selling, and you're only allowed to sell if you're on Robinhood. You're not allowed to fucking buy. And then the next day, Robinhood was like, look, we're gonna, you can buy, we're gonna allow you to buy these meme stocks again, but like for GameStop, you're only allowed to buy 2 shares. Like 2 shares. I mean, granted, at the time is a few $100s, $300, because it went. That's the thing. On Friday, it went back to 300 just to sucker in the last people, myself included. I bought some GameStop on Friday, although I had a reason for it, which I'll explain. But basically, what happened with this whole limiting, and that's another thing too, is so then Robinhood was like, we're limiting shares in that and like American Airlines and all these stocks, and then on Friday afternoon they were like, you can't buy Starbucks and all this shit, and people were like, oh, Robinhood like might be going out of business. They're like, they might be bankrupt. They're essentially having a liquidity crisis. They don't have enough money. And their CEO, Vlad or whatever, he did a bunch of interviews on Thursday, like Thursday evening after the first thing happened. And he's not like a super great front-facing guy. He's not like super charismatic. So he went on and he was like, look, nobody told us we had to do this. He's like, we had to, in order for our business, the way our settlements and clearing work, like we had to do this in order to save, allow the business to work. And then they were like, so you guys are running out of money? He's like, no, we're not running out of money. And then they're like, so what happened? Like, why'd you fuck all over? Because, lots of just normal people with Robinhood accounts got completely fucked. And he's like, why'd you do this? And he's like, well, we had to. And they're like, was anybody making you? And he's like, well, no, but the rules. And then everybody was just, all the conspiracy people like Dave Portnoy, everybody was like, this was obviously Steve Cohen, the guy who was like behind the hedge funds, was, his friends needed to get out of their shorts, but you don't want to do it when the stock's $400 because that'll just keep driving the price up and it'll cause this massive short squeeze. So you want it to do it when people are selling, to be buying into this selling to, minimize the loss. And so it obviously looked fishy as fuck. But then, you get a lot of explanations from it. And basically, and I don't totally know this. So if you're listening to this and you're like, that's not how it works, I apologize. But this is the depth to which I understand is stocks have work on what's called like in I guess America, maybe Canada too, probably lots of places. It's a very antiquated system. It's T+2 clearing. So basically what happens is you buy a stock, and your broker matches you with a seller or vice versa, and then it goes to like a clearinghouse, I guess, and it's like a 2-day settlement period. But because there's this 2-day settlement period, there's now risk involved. And you think like it's all digital. Why is it clearing? Because if you buy or sell stocks, it's like mostly if you buy a stock and then you sell it, that money is just instantly in your account. But I guess there's some sort of mechanism that's going on behind the scenes in the quote unquote plumbing of the stock market, where it has to go to this settlement thing. It's called, I was actually just looking at it briefly. It's called the Depository Trust and Clearing Company. They're a clearinghouse and they settle the majority of all transactions, right? So, and here's someone on Twitter who's basically explaining it. So the Depository Trust and Clearing Company, they provide Robinhood report, and essentially Robinhood has to put up money for these sums. They have to put up sums of money to cover these clearing. It's not like the full percent. It'll be like you have to put up 2% of all the trades or whatever to cover potential risk of this clearing. Even though the trade's already done, Robinhood has to put this money up out of their own pocket. They can't take that money from client accounts. It's like it's not legal because of whatever the SEC. So Robinhood just never really, because one, they're a free platform. You're not paying for trades, but they never really budgeted that this would ever happen, like where, this kind of volatility. So essentially they had these requirements where it's like, they would have to put up, basically loan out for a couple days, but it's part of their business model. Like they know they have to do this, put out some money, but they had to, tens of billions of dollars more than they were expecting, at which point they were, on Thursday, they're like, we do not have this fucking money. Like, I remember they were talking on Friday, they're like, yeah, Robinhood might go bankrupt by the end of the weekend. But Robinhood was straight up just like, we don't have this money. So they did have a liquidity crisis where they just ran out of money. But he can't really say that, because imagine the CEO of, he limits their trading, and it wasn't something he did. It was just straight up the regulators. They were like, this is so volatile, that they went from a 2% requirement on GameStop, where you have to put up 2% of the money, to, I believe, 100%, where straight up you just have to cover the entire sum of money. And because it was so heavily traded, instantly Robinhood's like, yeah, we do not have this kind of money. We we never budgeted for them to just increase the loan requirements by 50 times. So Robinhood's completely fucked. But then you can't go on, CNBC or like CNN, which he did both. Kudos to him, because that probably sucked. And that guy he was the number one villain in America at that point. But so he goes on CNBC, but like if he goes on CNBC and and he goes, what, here's what happened. Or even worse, if he did it during market hours. Imagine during market hours, he goes, hey, here's the deal. We ran out of money. If you're someone who has a Robinhood account and your broker just told you they fucking ran out of money, that's how contagion starts. It's like, remember the movie It's a Wonderful Life, when they're like, the bank runs out of money? Like, the last thing you want to do, especially with social media, is everybody being like, holy shit, Robinhood's run out of money. Sell all your stocks. Get the fuck out. And then they only allow selling. So like what would happen is everybody would be like worried that, nobody wants to be the last person, the sucker who like doesn't get their money. So then everybody's like, oh, we're just going to liquidate all our Robinhood accounts, get all our money out. And then it just starts a contagion where it could have real ripple effects in the stock market where like, and I mean, it did. The crazy thing is like the amount of ripple effects that occurred because of just the GameStop short squeeze was crazy, because, and I talked about it last week, but so all these hedge funds, they're short GameStop and then they're long like, Facebook, or, they're long all sorts of stocks, but like, and they have a mixture of both. But the thing is, so their shorts are going higher, which means they're just on paper losing more and more money, which they have to cover this. And so now they're doing it. The way they're covering it is they go, we're just going to sell our like super liquid stocks. We're going to sell our Apples and we're going to sell our Facebooks. So like Apple and Facebook, they went down a lot last week. Like Facebook top to bottom last week was like 10% drop, which is like pretty sizable for Facebook. It's one of the biggest companies in the world. And it dropped 10%. And the reason was because all these, hedge funds were like selling their Facebook to cover their GameStop losses. So it was causing like quite a bit of chaos, in the markets, and it was unclear what was going on. So I mentioned earlier that I bought GameStop. So I didn't buy a lot, but on Friday afternoon, I was like thinking about this, and I'm like, essentially all last week, GameStop and the stock market were fairly negatively correlated, which just means like, if GameStop goes up, everything else was going down. At least it was starting to feel that way. And I had this idea on Friday where I'm like, you know what? Like if on Monday, say GameStop goes to 1,000, it's not, but say it goes to $1,000, I'm like, all these stocks are probably going to tank. Everything else is just going to tank so badly. So then on Friday, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to buy just a tiny little bit just as a hedge against, disaster and all the other stocks I owned. So I bought a tiny amount of GameStop at $310 and then sold it at Tuesday for like 120. I got smoked on it. Lost a bit of cash, a few shekels, if you will. But it did what I expected it to do. All my other stocks went up and then GameStop dropped. But like I've been talking, because everybody was like, oh, it's the little guy against Wall Street. And you're like, yeah, okay, the little guy started this thing. Like, the Redditors, the Wall Street Bets people, they started this trade and they brought it to attention. But the people who really made money last week were just other hedge funds. They weren't the little guy. The little guy, I've been speaking to friends of mine since this whole debacle has played out. And almost to a person, they're all still holding GameStop shares and they're all down tons of money. Because here's the thing. Like Wall Street Bets went from, I started following Wall Street Bets when they had like 1 million subscribers. Okay. I think they have 9 million right now, and they had like 2 million at the start of last week. So they've gone up 400% roughly or whatever, 4 times, something like that in the past like week and a half. A lot of people came in, they said, oh my God, there's all this money to be made. We're just going to blindly follow this deep fucking value guy who has lost, I don't know, $25 million in the last week or so. Granted, don't feel bad for him. He was smart enough to like cash out 15 million. So he made a lot of money, but he lost like, pretty large sums of money in the past couple of days. But so his thesis, because he basically became this god in Wall Street Bets, where everybody's like, we're just going to blindly follow this guy, deep fucking value. So, and his thing was like, oh, I think it's going to go to 1,000. Because his whole thing was like, everybody's like, hold the line, don't sell. If you sell your shares, then you give an opportunity for the shorts to get out. But most of the shorts, it seems like they're out of this thing. And so, there isn't this short squeeze still to happen. I mean, there are shorts, but the squeeze likely is not really going to happen. But so anyways, lots of people like bought in at 300 and they go, oh, it's going to 1,000. You're like, 300 to 1,000. I'm going to triple my money. More than that. I'd be stupid to sell at any point. And I'm just going to wait till 1,000 because that's when deep fucking value said he's going to get out. And then the stock drops to 100 and people are just like, oh, well, what do you do now? You're like, and the thing is like today, it was up like $2. It's like, the crazy volatility that everybody was like loving about GameStop, like it's gone. That story I don't want to say it's dead, but like, first off, if you're listening right now and you own GameStop and you're up on GameStop, sell it. Like just if you're listening in this moment and you even are up $10, and I know that in your mind, you're like, yeah, but like, I was up 300% and now I'm only up 20%. Sell it. Sell it right now. Yes, maybe it'll go up some more. It's possible, and you'll miss out on that, and maybe it'll go to 1,000, but it's not going to 1,000. That's not going to happen. The likelihood is that people are going to start shorting it again. It's going to go to, best case scenario, it's maybe worth, I don't know, $40. Like I keep talking to people and I'm just like, what the fuck do they even do? Like AMC is a different story. And I talked about this last week where AMC is like, they essentially, because the share price rose so much on AMC, like they avoided bankruptcy because they just put on, it's now implied that they can just go do what's called like a secondary offering where they just sell their shares into the market, which whenever you do that, it dilutes the stock. Like say there's like 1 million shares of the company at $1. So you're like, the company's worth $1 million. What'll happen is they'll be like, okay, we're going to issue 100,000 more shares, right? So now there's 1.1 million shares, but the company's still worth $1 million. So those 1.1 million shares are now worth like 90 cents each because that $1 million, the company's still worth that $1 million. But so just based on the implication that they could do that, like people like who bought, for example, like if you bought AMC at $15 last week and you want to hold on to that, I say go for it. Again, not financial advice. I would just like to hammer that home that this is not financial advice. Do not take my advice. The only advice that you should take of mine is sell fucking GameStop if you're up on it. If you're down on it, I have bad news for you. You should also sell GameStop because there's a thing called opportunity cost where you're missing out on a lot of good opportunities. And like the stock market is such a mind fuck sometimes, especially when you're up. Like I think what's what you're going to find out is most people with GameStop specifically were, they bought in under 100, at which point they're up. That's fantastic. Maybe you bought in $150. Maybe you say you bought in $150 on the way up. Okay. So at one point you were up, you had tripled your money. Okay. Now you're down. That psychological element, it's kind of like the same. I don't know if people here like gamble, but it's kind of like the same element where it's just like if you go to the casino and you're just like, you go up you walk in with $500, you're up 500, and then you're down 600. You lose that 500, you're down another 100, and you're like, I'm not walking away down 100 when I was up 500. I'm just either I'm losing everything or I'm getting that $500 back. Like there's like this weird psychological component where you're just kind of you're battling fear and greed, which is a very like normal thing in the stock market. But I think most people who like had 50 shares, 100 shares of GameStop, even more, like they were up huge sums of money on paper, where they looked in their, they looked at their account and they were laughing. They're like, holy shit, I am up so much fucking money right now. I bought maybe 200 shares at $150. What's that? 30 grand? No, I'm bad at math. 100, 300? No, yeah, it's 30 grand, right? Sorry, it's late right now. So, you say you buy $30,000 worth, and then your $30,000 becomes $90,000, right? I think that's right. Yeah. So you bought 200 shares at 150. So you're like, I put in 30,000, and then you look at it at one point, and that 30,000 is $90,000. Okay. Now that 30,000 is $20,000. A lot of people psychologically just cannot just take that loss and move on, because they're just like, it's such a mind fuck, because all you're thinking about is you're like, but I had $90,000. Like, I had so much money. That is so much money to so many people. And then they're like, and it goes, it fucking went in the blink of an eye. GameStop got halted on Thursday after this Robinhood news. And it wasn't just Robinhood. It was a lot of these like discount brokerages. But like, it got halted, I think, like 15 times in a day. And halting is basically, they just are like, all right, everybody, just like, we're going to pump the brakes on this. It's a timeout. It's literally a stock timeout. We're going to we're going to take a 5-minute break. Just compose yourself. Don't do anything fucking stupid. And then there were, when it happens usually when just like stock drops a shit ton in like, moments. And they're like, what, we just want everybody to just calm down for a minute, and then we'll just reorganize. And then, maybe when we reopen the stock market, you're not all just going to panic sell, right? But that's what happened. And it dropped so fast. So there's just the element where people just can't take these losses. But like for something like GameStop, I wouldn't, if this is, like, I've been trading stocks familiar with the stock market for, probably 15 years. I went to school. I don't know if you know this. I went to school for like economics or whatever. Me and Ryan Long did. It's kind of how the name Fuckonomics for our other podcast came about, is we were like, we're like comedians with economics degrees. It's a stupid name, obviously. But this is how, if I had to guess what's going to happen with GameStop, is it went from, whatever, $3 to $500, which is insane. And the thing is, there's probably people who are like, bought it at 20, got to 500, and there's just like this paralysis where you're just like, yeah, I know I should sell now. It's so much money. But then you're like, but it could go to 1,000 and I'll have twice as much money. And normally with stuff like that, you do not have a lot of time to make these decisions. Normally, like at huge tops like that, you don't get like a ton of time to make these decisions. I kind of want to pull up the chart of it just to see. Hold on, I'm going to pull it up just so we can look at this chart of GameStop, just how fucked up it is. But you don't get a lot of time to make these decisions. Like, it happens super quick, and then you're like, oh shit, should I sell? And then people just start panicking and selling. So this is what I think is going to happen. GameStop is it's like, or I think it's around like $120 right now. I'd say most retail traders, all the Wall Street Bets people who thought they were fucking over the man, are currently down money, I would guess, most of them, because think about it. I mean, there's 8 million people on Wall Street Bets. It was, before GameStop really took off, it was like 2 million. Okay, let's see. I'm pulling up a chart of GameStop here. It was like 2 million. So today's Wednesday. So yeah. So it closed on the 22nd at $65 a share, and everybody was like, "This is bananas," right? And that's when Wall Street Bets really started getting people's attention big time, because it had opened the week on January 19th. It opened at $41. So it went from $41 and then went up to 65 in a week, and then it went from 65 at one point to as high as 483, which is ridiculous. Okay, that is just absurd. But yeah, so what I think is going to happen is, and what did it close at today? 92.41 is what it closed at. It's going to slowly just bleed down. I don't think it might have some big moves down. It might have some, minor moves up, but like, this thing is over. And it's funny too, because last week, all these people were like, all these market people or like who have, been in the market for, and a lot of them were like, these rich guys who people like fucking hate, were just, they were like we need to protect people from themselves. And everybody was like, fuck you. We don't need, people don't need to be protected from themselves. And then a week later, you're like, yeah, some people could have really used that advice, because the amount of people I'm talking to are just completely fucked. Okay, so here it is. I got this day pulled up. So that day, it closed the previous day at $343. Then it went up to $470. It hit $483 by 10 a.m. exactly. Okay, by 11:18, which is an absolutely nauseating dip. So 10 to 11:18, 78 minutes, which was hell if you were long the stock. It went from 483 high to a low of 112. Okay, so it dropped $370 in 78 minutes, which, and people like, I've been not like on a decline like that, but sometimes you're like watching a stock and you kind of just it stuns you, where you're just like, what the fuck is going on? And it's just going and going. But so I think it's just, this is going to keep going lower. If you, for example, maybe have like AMC and you're like, I want to hold the bag, as they say, where you're just like, I'm just going to hang on the AMC for the next couple years, and hopefully, like, AMC will go higher. I'm sure you'll eventually get your money back in AMC if you bought AMC at $15. Because really, AMC at $15 isn't that crazy. AMC was like, I'm looking at a thing of AMC. Like, the AMC was $20 pre-COVID. Was it? Yeah, like AMC was pre-COVID. AMC hit $20. It's like, it'll go back to $20 at some point, I'm sure. GameStop will not. You are gonna get completely fucked on GameStop. And yeah, that's the whole thing. It's like, there's all these people who are like last week, who are like, people need to be protected from themselves, and I don't, like, people you have the right to lose money, but this element of these people being like, oh yeah, we're taking down the Wall Street guys. No, the Wall Street guys made tons of money. Some of them did, the hedge funds who were betting on GameStop and all the other stocks. The ones who were short GameStop, like, it was a flesh wound. You dinged them pretty bad, but they'll be fine. They got bailed out. Robinhood got bailed out. Robinhood will be fine. And then there's just going to be all these people who just like this is what I was saying is, yeah, so Wall Street Bets has 9 million subscribers, and most of them came in last week. So you have to assume that they bought in, like, at the, if you bought in at any point last week, okay, any point other than, hold on, what day is this? 26. Sorry. Okay, yeah. So if you bought in at any point last week other than Monday, if you bought in at the lows on Monday, which was $62, you're still up, okay? If you bought in early on Tuesday, you're still up. If you bought in at any other time other than that, which I guarantee you, if most people who bought GameStop coming into Wall Street Bets last week, which is like millions of people probably, they're all fucking down. And I'm sure a lot of them have like never traded stocks before. The amount of people who are like, yeah, my girlfriend was like trying to figure out, she's like, how do you trade stocks? I was like, I've never heard of stocks. And like the amount of people who are like talking anecdotally about, yeah, I give my kids, like, I let them have a Robinhood account. They're like 12 and they're all like buying GameStop and shit. Now, granted, it's their parents' money, and but some people like are losing their own money, and then they're just like, okay, well, what do I do now? Do I just hang on and hopefully this goes back to, and I can break even or maybe make some money? And you're like, you're never going to happen. It's just going to slowly grind lower until it, I could see it, I don't know, it'll go to like at least cut in half. I don't know if it'll happen really quickly. And also, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm saying this right now, Thursday, and classic, just like last week, GameStop goes to $1,000 as you're listening to this, and I'm a fucking clown, and everybody's like, and this will just be on record as me being like, yeah, fucking GameStop's going to $40, and then you're listening to this now as it's $1,000, and you're a fucking Wall Street Bets retard who's a millionaire right now, and I'm just a moron. I don't know, but I will say that the odds are that it's not going to work out. But some damage really was done to the industry from what I understand. Like in terms of short sellers, because there's a lot of stuff that like I didn't know about tons of shit until this all happened, and it starts, the onion starts getting peeled back. So short sellers, what happens with something like say like a GameStop is like there's the most famous short sellers who are consistently making tons of money. They make 50% returns every year, which is a lot. It's a lot for the stock market. They're making these huge returns every year. And then what happens is because like it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy where because they're so good at like shorting stocks and picking stocks, they'll just be like, hey, we're shorting GameStop, everybody. Then they announce it. Excuse me one second. Back is my stupid radiator. I live in New York. It's this dumbass steam radiators. I know you're like, did something happen? It did not happen. Maybe I'll edit that out, but I won't because I'm talking about this now. But anyways, so they short these stocks, and then they'll go and just publicly make an announcement saying like, hey, we're short GameStop. And then everybody's like, oh man, these really smart people are short GameStop. Like instantly people just are like, we're going to sell this stock or we're going to short it because like they're smarter than us. They know. So if they're saying they're short, we'd be stupid to be buying GameStop. So then all these people sell, it automatically drives the price down. Then all these people come in, copy them, further drives the price down, which is how this like huge short interests happen. But there's no requirement if it's under 5% of your like total money you manage to tell people you're short. You don't have to do that. They do this specifically because it's an easy way to just kind of get the ball rolling because you just are like, you're the biggest shark. And then you're just like, hey, this company's going under. And then just the act of you saying it instantly hurts it and kind of just like starts the downtrend. So this likely will stop short sellers from doing stuff like this where they announce it. And I'm sure lots of people will stop shorting stock. Like, hedge funds will be like, we're just not shorting period because we don't ever want to have to encounter some stuff. Because like a lot of fear was put in these short sellers and hedge funds where they're like, man, this is pretty fucked up. We could have got our whole thing, just our whole business blown up. But one thing that, a lot of people don't realize about short sellers is that, and there's a really good podcast. There's a famous investor, his name's Bill Ackman, and he was famously short Herbalife, and he went out publicly and said it. And then this other investor, I can't remember what his name is, this really famous one, Carl Icahn, was like, oh, you're short, and they had some big beef, and so he's like, I'm just gonna like cause this short squeeze and fuck you, and he lost like $2 billion because of it. But he was on this podcast talking about like short sellers have an incentive to find frauds, and there's like on Wall Street at any given time, there's all these companies that are frauds. Not a lot of them. I was gonna say a lot of them are Chinese, but that's not true. But there are Chinese companies all the time that are frauds. Like there's this Luckin Coffee that you can look up that was like a complete fraud. They're like, yeah, we're like the next Starbucks, and then they were like two guys running out of like an office. Like it was a total fraud. They made up all their sales and everything. And so short sellers are given this incentive where they're like, you discover a fraud and they're kind of like investigators a lot of the time, is they just do tons of work. They do tons of research. They do like, they're on the ground, all this stuff. And then they'll find a fraud and they'll short it. They'll announce that they found this fraud. But the thing is, it is a fraud. Like they really will find these real frauds, short them. And then their payment for like discovering these frauds is that they get to short the stock and make a lot of money, right? But because a lot of them are going to go away, like you will now, like a weird knock-on consequence of this whole GameStop thing is like more regular investors will start getting defrauded by like shady companies because the SEC like can't catch them all. It's just impossible. You need short sellers. And another thing short sellers do, which I also didn't realize, is because short sellers, to close a short position, you have to buy. Like you need to buy a stock I talked about this last week, but you need to buy. So when a stock's like cratering, short sellers buy to, get out of their position, which kind of like slows down the rate of which a stock will drop because short sellers are like buying, they keep buying. So they'll prop it up. So they'll kind of like smooth the drop and make it like a little slower and like not as violent. But if there's no short sellers, then these drops will just be like huge. Like they'll just be way, way bigger. and faster. So that's interesting. Like there's this company in Germany called Wirecard, which just was like a huge fraud that was found out last year. They're like a payment processor. They were doing all sorts of like money laundering and like, dealing with terrorists. And they basically like, I think, petitioned the German government to like, I don't know if it was banning short selling, but they banned like something about like getting all the scrutiny off of them so that like there couldn't be short selling of their stock. I think it was maybe just banning short selling in general in Germany. It was banned or on the market that they're on. And then they just like, the moment that happened, they just went ham and they just start committing all sorts of crazy crimes because they knew that the short sellers are gone and they're kind of just free to do whatever the fuck they want. So that will be an interesting effect. I don't know when that'll happen. But more importantly, I know this is hard to hear, but if you have shares of GameStop, sell them. Sell them now. Just get it over with. It's like a Band-Aid because I've seen this before. There is a chance. Yeah, maybe it'll go up a bit, but like there's going to be people who bought GameStop. Like it'll be like BlackBerry was BlackBerry was obviously everybody knows BlackBerry was like, the biggest phone company before Apple came along with the iPhone, and the shares were like $250 a share. And then, that was like in 2007 or something. And then like, up until a month ago, they were $7. And there's so many people who just like, bought them at 200 and they dropped. And they're like, I'll just hold on. And you end up holding these things for like years. There's like a joke where it's like, you buy something for a trade. Like so many people will buy GameStop for a trade and then become long-term investors until they finally just get so fed up with it 2 years later where they're just like, you know what? They just throw their hands up and they're like, fuck this. I'm just over this. I'm sick of just looking at this like 90% loss in my account every day. I don't want to see this. Whereas if you just get rid of it now, you could go buy something else and you're just that much closer to making up that loss because at least you're not losing the time. But I mean, and again, these are mistakes I've personally made. A lot of people have, but sometimes people have to, make this mistake to learn it themselves. But the problem is a lot of these people with the GameStop people are just like, this might have been the first stock they ever bought. And now they're just getting absolutely fucked thinking that they were about to make all this free, easy money, unfortunately. But yeah, the GameStop squeeze I think is over. But again, maybe tomorrow it'll be $1,000 and then I'll have to just fucking post this podcast and feel like an absolute fucking clown. The funniest thing too is the silver squeeze because there's a lot of shit going on with Wall Street bets. There's a part of me that's like, Wall Street bets is just gonna end up in the history books as the biggest pump and dump scheme ever because like the main thing in the pump and dump is everybody's like, you gotta buy, hold, don't sell, while it's like other people are just like they're selling. They might be saying like, oh, hold the line, but then in fact they're just like, oh, we gotta get out, and they're selling. But so the next thing that they were saying is, oh, we're going to squeeze silver. This started getting trending on Wall Street Bets last week. I actually bought some silver too because of it. Not physical, like physical silver. Although I do own some physical silver. And it's funny because people were starting to be like, oh yeah, silver's going to go up so much. It's going to be the greatest investment ever. We're going to make so much money. And all I can think of is like, I bought silver like at the last big rally that silver had in like 2011. And I'm still down on it. Like, it's like, I'm not even close to even on my silver purchase from 2011. And all these people are like, oh man, silver's such a great purchase. And it almost is good that I bought it. Cause then I'm like, yeah, no, it's not. It's a terrible purchase. I'm like, it's a terrible investment. I bought it fucking 10 years ago and I'm not even close to being even on it. But so anyways, the big thing was like, they're like, oh, there's going to be this silver squeeze. We're going to buy all these options because silver is manipulated, and it's, the price of silver is manipulated by central banks, and it's people are short it, and we're gonna do what we did with GameStop with the price of silver. And it's like, yeah, these two guys, the Hunt brothers in the 80s, they tried to corner the market in silver. They failed spectacularly. They were up hundreds of millions of dollars at one point. But also, the silver is manipulated. There's no question about it. But the thing is, it's manipulated by central banks. This isn't like GameStop where it's like a couple hedge funds that are like short a couple $1 billion. You're talking about like the entire financial power of like the United States and China keeping the price of silver down. And the reason they do it is so that they can say that there's no inflation, which I do believe that. I do believe it's manipulated. But either way, the people on Wall Street Bets were like, yeah, we're going to squeeze silver. And I bought into it because I was like, you know what, maybe this will be good for a trade. Just like a short one. And then silver went up a ton on Monday morning. Like I had this one silver stock that was up like, I think 40% on Monday at one point. But then I got caught with the same thing where I was like, oh, maybe silver is about to squeeze. It's gonna go up so much. And then I was like holding it, and then it just started to tank. And then I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna sell half of it just so I can, like, you know, not be too worried in case this is completely wrong. And then the next morning it just opened down 20%, and it's literally just like back to where it was last week. Like it was, you know, it was like it never happened. But that was just such a bullshit squeeze. So I'd say the Wall Street bets, they're going to take a while. I mean, the sad thing is like all the people are like, you know, diamond hands. That's their big ones. There's paper hands where it's like you're weak. And, you know, I would have fallen into the paper hands category in October when I sold my shares for whatever, 11 something. And, you know, these diamond hands hung on. And that's another thing too, the guy Deep Fucking Value, because every day he would update his position, and that's what was keeping so many people in it, is he would update his position being like, hey, I'm still in it, and everybody's like, well, if he's still, like, if you go look at the Wall Street bets, everybody's like, well, if he's still in it, I'm still in it, right? And today he actually said, yeah, I'm going to stop updating this every day. And I don't know his motivation, but I'm sure he's starting to realize that, like, if he made tons of money, like if GameStop goes to zero tomorrow, he still walked away with like $14 million. Whereas I think he realizes if he keeps being like, yeah, you know, hold the line, don't sell, and GameStop goes to $10, he's going to ruin so many people's fucking lives. Which it's funny because all these rich people were on CNBC and on the news basically saying this last week, and everybody was telling them to go fuck themselves. But there's a real chance that that's going to happen. Another thing too with last Thursday is I was never a crypto guy. I was never ever a crypto guy at all. I've never been a crypto guy. I was just like, I don't get it. It's stupid. Like, what is this? It's just this fake digital money. And I said this for a long time. And then last week was, you know, I was my, I don't want to say my come to Jesus moment or whatever, but last week was when Robinhood straight up was like, you're not allowed to buy anything. And then I go, okay, now I get crypto. Now I get the element where like, you don't want some company to just tell you, hey, you're not allowed to buy the thing that you fucking, like, with your money that you signed up for in your account, you can't buy it. And then and so I went and I bought a bunch of Bitcoin, and I bought, not a bunch, but I bought some, and I bought some crypto related stocks. And then later that day, Elon Musk put Bitcoin in his profile on Twitter, at which point Bitcoin shot up. Just like, it's crazy the power he has. He just goes, I like Bitcoin, and then just like boom, it rockets. But I think that was like a big moment for Bitcoin. I guess we'll see in the future whether that's true or not. But for me, I feel like that was Bitcoin's big moment. Was last week when Robinhood fucked everybody. Okay, I'm not going to talk about this anymore. I know a lot of people like the stock stuff. I guess I'm able to synthesize it for some people who don't understand it. And I mean, you know what? If you like this stuff, if you have questions, I don't know, like if you have any questions, just tweet at me. I can talk about them on future episodes. I don't want to really give stock advice because the thing is, it's easy to give advice for people to buy. It's harder to give advice for people to sell. Although I will say this is a plug. I get nothing from this at all. But this is just a friend of mine. He runs a newsletter, a financial newsletter. It's called Empire Elite. He's behind the finance satire site that I work on, Hard Money, that I'm the editor of. His name's Enrique Abeda. These guys are the real deal. They know a lot. I think it's like $60 a month. If you don't know what you're doing and you want some stock picks, these guys are, and watch me just like be like, yeah, sign up. And then like the next 10 they give is bad. But no, these guys are really smart. And they give good kind of explanations of why they buy stocks, that's like more important, I think, in my opinion. More important than just someone being like, it's the classic, like, teach a man to fish or whatever, give him fish, or versus this is like, if you'll get their explanation, and then through their explanation, you'll start understanding how things work a bit better. But anyways, they also will tell you when to sell. So that's like a big one if you don't know what the fuck you're doing. But so yeah, I don't really want to give financial advice or anything like that, because who knows, maybe I'll be fucking in the gutter with the rest of the GameStop people. I mean, I'm not going to lie, there were a couple times last week when I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Just buy GameStop. Just buy it. I'm glad I didn't, because it's going down. I think it's going down. It's going to be not good. But so that's the end of the financial advice or stock market stuff. I'm sure there'll be more stock market, but this will blow over. I'm sure like Donald Trump's impeachment trial that's coming up will. I haven't talked about him in like 3 or 4 episodes. That has to be some kind of record. Remember when all I talked about was Donald Trump? Now it stunks. But yeah, we'll talk about a few things. This is in the realm of Trump. Well, I guess not. I guess not really. The MyPillow guy. I actually wanted to talk about this last week because the guy's fucking completely. I don't know if you know the MyPillow guy. He sells those dumbass pillows. He's like a former crack addict and now he's like Christian. The guy's having a complete meltdown. I've never seen someone have such a severe meltdown on just their whole life. So he basically is like trying to say that the elections are rigged and the voting machines are rigged. And then he went into like. He met with Trump and he was talking about like martial law. He had that like written down about doing like martial law and like appointing new directors of like the CIA. And then there was a rumor where he was dating that like Jane Krakowski chick from, what show was she in? She was in 30 Rock. And like there was this rumor that he was dating her and she was like, what the fuck? But maybe that's true. Who knows? I mean, he's rich. But then he got kicked off of Twitter. He's getting kicked off all his social media because he keeps just like spreading all these like, I guess lies about all this, that the election was rigged. And then he went on Newsmax. And if you don't know what Newsmax is, it is the like most far right thing. And he goes on Newsmax talking about, how he like got kicked off and all this stuff. And how he got banned from Twitter and whether he'll be allowed back and how all these companies are like not carrying his like I'm sure someone who works for the company is like, hey Mike, can you just like stop talking? You're killing this fucking company. I mean, I guess if you're like a hardcore MAGA person, you're just like your whole house is just MyPillow everything. You're like, you just have a fucking couch made out of MyPillows. Every chair you have is MyPillow. Your fucking dishwasher is MyPillow. You just like everything's MyPillow if you're a hardcore MAGA person. And then everything else is you're just like every other person is like, no. All these huge chains not carrying MyPillow anymore. And so he went on Newsmax, which is like pretty far right wing, like not I mean, they take themselves seriously, but it's like, if you think Fox News is right wing, they are like way further right of that. And he goes on and they were just like, they couldn't even talk to him. Like it's this guy and this woman interviewing him and he's talking about all this election and they go, yeah, just so you know, like this is unsubstantiated. And he's like, why won't you like, just like, well, I have all this evidence, blah, blah. And they're like, no, they're like, here at Newsmax, we kind of agree that Trump, like Biden is the legitimate president. And he goes, and then the guy just literally got up. You have to watch it. I was thinking about playing the audio, but the audio, it's better the video. And then there's like a scene where the guy just gets up out of his chair. He goes, can we just like end this segment? And he just gets up out of his chair. And when Newsmax is calling you a crazy psycho, the only thing he could really do at this point is be like, you know what? I relapsed back onto crack, and that's why my behavior is like this. I apologize. It was the crack doing this, not me. Please accept my apologies. Go Biden. So that was funny. Here is, I guess we could classify this as Twitter beef. I don't know. I thought this was stupid. I don't even know if this is worth talking about, but Chrissy Teigen, who's just like spends tons of time on Twitter. She's quirky. She's wacky and quirky. She has 10 kids. Remember when she posted the thing of like her kid dying? She like had a photo op of like she was supposed to have a new baby and it died. And then she was like, let's just do a photo op quickly, which I'm sure it was horrific to have your baby die. But then you're like, the first thing she's like, let's get some photos of this if we can. I thought that was weird. But then she tweeted, what's the most expensive thing you've eaten that you thought sucked? She goes, one time John and I were at a restaurant and the waiter recommended a nice Cabernet. We got the bill and it was $13,000. How do you casually recommend that wine? We didn't even finish it and it had been cleared. And then everybody's like, yeah, that's not super relatable, Chrissy. We don't really buy $13,000 bottles of wine. I've never bought a $13,000 bottle of wine. I would tell you this though. If I bought a $13,000 bottle of wine, which I won't ever in my life. If I was at a table with somebody who bought a $13,000 wine and there was a one fucking drop left in that thing and the server tried to take that away, I would snatch that shit out of his hand so fast. I'd be like, are you out of your fucking mind? You're trying to take away this $13,000 bottle of wine when it's not finished? Do you know how much, like even just a couple drops, like that's worth $500. I would lose my mind. But anyway, she took all this heat, but then you're like, What do you think? You follow Chrissy Teigen because she's rich and famous, and then you're like upset because she's just giving you a story about how she's rich and famous? Like, what is the beef here? Oh, and then she actually said, she goes, my little Jack would have been born this week. So I guess the kid who was supposed to be born that she took the photo up of was supposed to be born this week. So maybe she's having a tough time, and then everybody's really kicking her while she's down with this whole $13,000 bottle of wine. Tough to be Chrissy Teigen these days. Also, it's like if I was a waiter, it's like this classic move. If you're a waiter, they always go, oh, what's good? And they always just, like 99% of the time, you go to a restaurant, you go, hey, what's good here? And they just recommend the most expensive thing because they're like, yeah, I just make more money if I tell you that the most expensive thing is the best thing, which a lot of times it is the best thing. Not always. But I'm like, yeah, if I was Chrissy Teigen, I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure they could afford a $13,000 bottle of wine. I'm sure John Legend isn't like, $13,000 for a bottle of wine. That's atrocious. You fucking can afford it. Okay. 2 more things, and then we'll wrap this up. Thank you, everybody, for listening in there. I've been talking about this many years ago. This is back in the news, the whole trans athletes, like, how Biden is like making it so that if you identify as a woman, you can do women's sports, which I don't care because I'm not about to give a shit about women's sports. That's my main takeaway. People have many reasons for this. A lot of people are just like, that's wrong. It's unfair. But my thing is just like, I don't care. I don't care about women's sports. Maybe that's not the right take. Maybe I should care about women's sports, and I should care that trans women should be allowed in women's sports. That's probably the most PC take. The proper take should be that I care about women's sports. They're better than men's sports for sure. Like if I had to rank sports, it would be women's sports, then men's sports, obviously. I care about women's sports. I know female athletes, and trans women are women, and they should be allowed to compete against other women. That is the proper take that you should have always. And so then the ACLU was tweeting about this because I guess people are like, yeah, we don't totally agree with this. And then they go, attacks on trans youth in sports are showing up in dozens of state legislatures nationwide. These bans are discriminatory, harmful, and unscientific. Here's why. Fact 1, trans girls are girls. Sure. I'll concede that, if you want to say like their brain is female and at birth, they believe that they're a woman, but they're in the wrong body. No problem. I'm happy to concede that, you live your life. Nobody wants to stop you from living your life. And this whole thing is unfair. I'm going to, like, to all parties, in my opinion, and even trans, because it would be tough if you're trans, obviously. It would be a tough life to live. Then the next thing, trans athletes do not have an unfair advantage in sports. That's when the ratio started. Okay, nobody, and again, I think I've been talking about this this is such old news at this point, but I guess Trump kind of like was like, yeah, we're not letting this happen. And then Biden showed up and he goes, back to trans women in women's sports. But like Fallon Fox, the MMA fighter, used to be a man and then transitioned, fought women. The women were literally, one of them had their orbital bone and their eye socket broken by Fallon Fox. One of them was like, I've never been hit that hard by a woman in my life. Fallon Fox transitioned legally because they have all these things where they go like, if you're a woman, you have to like be on hormone replacement therapy. You have to have a certain level of testosterone. But it's just the fact is like, if you're born in a man's body, you have an advantage. I don't care how much estrogen you pump into them after the fact. If you grew up the first 20 years of your life a man and then you transition, there's some advantage. Is it as big of an advantage as just being a man? No, I agree it's not. But it's more of an advantage than just straight up being a woman. So, and there's so many examples of it. And I think there's one thing to be like, look, we're just trying to be inclusive. We're trying to be nice. I mean, this does fuck over women. There's no question about it. Like if you're a woman and you're like competing in say like a race and then, a trans woman like goes and wins the race and then you're like, okay, well, I'm not going to win my state championship now because a trans woman I have to compete against someone who has this advantage and I'm not allowed to talk about them having this advantage because that's transphobic, even though it's obvious that they have this advantage. So anyways, now they're drumming up this whole thing where they're like, trans women don't have any sort of advantage. And just people with common sense are like, look, like it's, you know what, you can want to be inclusive because, like, you know, it's obviously if I'm a trans woman and I want to be an athlete, it's like, you know, you're being hugely disadvantaged by like going on testosterone or, you know, hormone replacement therapy. You're like, I can't compete against men anymore. That's for sure. And then, you're like, and then I'm not allowed to compete with women because I have an advantage here. So you're like, what? You have to have your own division for trans people, which would make the most amount of sense. But then you're like kind of alienating them again. And like, you're like, that's not, it's a pretty, you know, there's no solution is what I'm saying. There's not like a really good solution to this whole thing. Unfortunately, there's not. Either way, people are going to get screwed. Someone's going to, you know, get the short end of the stick. But telling people, like, you know, if I'm a woman, like if I'm, say, like a track athlete or something, and I'm trying to, you know, I'm racing in college, which I don't even know if there really is a future in racing. Like how many people are like professional, like decathlon or some shit? I don't know. Probably not a lot. But if you have to compete against someone who used to be a man, your odds just probably went down a bit. And yes, sometimes biological women do beat trans women, but it still is an advantage. So that was back in the news. And then one last thing, because I'm fucking tired. The University of Yale, the Justice Department, drops a lawsuit against Yale that was accusing Yale of discriminating against white and Asian applicants in reversal from Trump era. So basically what happened is Yale straight up said that they're like, you know what, we want certain, because here's the thing with the diversity thing. When you start setting diversity quotas, saying, you know, we need X, we want 10% of our student body to be black. Okay, well, that has to come from somewhere because, you know, they don't just be like, we're not expanding the total. We're just like, the total stays the same. We're just rechanging the composition. So that has to come from somewhere. So that came at the expense of white and then Asian people and Asian applicants. And so then they sued and then it got thrown out, but it's going to the Supreme Court. I think I've probably talked about this on this podcast too, because you're like, yes, obviously, like there's just been this decision where we're like, you know, because when people were like, okay, we're going to discriminate against white people because they're the majority, and yes, it's discrimination, but it needs to be done in order for whatever balance. And people were like, okay, I get it. And then they're like, okay, we got to go after Asians too because they're just performing way too well. And, you know, we can't only discriminate against white people. We need, you know, we got to keep some white people around. So then they're like, we're going to go after Asian people too. And then people started to be like, yeah, that seems pretty racist. That does seem discriminatory. I know what you're doing is you think you're doing a good thing, but, you know, if you're picking someone who's less qualified because of their skin color over someone who's, you know, more qualified because they're Asian, like that's pretty racist. And then they have to, like, you know, explain their way out of it, you know, but diversity, and you're like, yeah, this is fucked up. The whole thing is bizarre. And it sucks because, you know, these are real people. Like there is some Asian person who couldn't go to Yale and had to go to, I don't know, what's one less than Yale? I'm too tired to even think about this now. And I think they're taking it to the Supreme Court. But this is, you know, this is the Trumper people. This is the kind of stuff where they're like, yeah, you know what? I remember why we voted for Trump. It was stuff like this. We did like, it's the trend. Like a lot of the people, like Trump people, are like, you know, because by the end it was a complete shit show. But I'm sure like they're starting to see this stuff pop back up with Biden. They go, oh yeah, this is why we voted for Trump. It was stuff like this. This was the exact reason we were voting for Trump, is because we didn't like this stuff. And then the moment Trump's gone, it's just like, here we go, back in your face, all this stuff. So that's fun. Okay, that's it. That's it for this week's episode. I appreciate everybody who's listening. We had a huge spike in listeners last week, I guess, with all the stonks stuff. I feel like such a loser even calling it stonks. But all the stock market stuff, I guess people enjoyed it. So thank you for everybody who's the new listeners. If you enjoyed the episode, leave me a review. Anything helps. If you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe. I feel like a fucking loser even saying that. Until next week, I will see you. Bye-bye.